Alright guys, how's it going today? So my name is P017 or PO17, whichever you prefer to call me. And I'm going to be making a pretty interesting video. It's going to be a little bit long because there's actually quite a lot to cover. Because I'm not just going to be talking about the CRT TV that's in front of me, but I'm going to be talking about a couple things that I've been doing as well as the actual brand behind this CRT. And so that's going to be a whole thing in of itself, but I'm going to put it all in one video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. Alright, so for those who joined in, thank you very much for watching this awesome video. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you actually are more well informed of this by, I guess, whatever you want to learn. So, for those who are coming into this, this is my Sylvania CT202SL8 CRT TV made in May of 2007. It's a pretty interesting CRT, which is why I'm going to be making a video of it, as well as talking about a whole bunch of things. But because of that, so if you joined in, whether you're looking at the CRT TV, whether you have something like this, or whether you're interested about the service behind it in terms of servicing this set and all that sort of stuff, that's what I'm going to be talking about. But for now, let's go ahead and focus on the TV. So like I said, Sylvania CT202SL8, this is a 20 or 19-inch set that is a flat screen CRT TV standard definition, so 240p 480i. And it is a triple play set, meaning that it is not only a TV, but it is also a DVD and a VHS player built in. Now, Sylvania itself, as a company, this is more of a rebrand. This is all under the parent company name called Funai, which had a whole bunch of different companies, namely Emerson, Magnavox to an extent. Some of them were Philips, some of them were Funai. Sylvania, Symphonic, Durabrand, to name a few. There were some insignias, I believe, that were also under the Funai brand. All they are, across the board in terms of these TVs, they're essentially just rebrands of themselves. But these TVs are very, very cheap, which meant they were very affordable, especially back then, which meant that these sets are just all over the place. They're extremely common, and they're extremely cheap, and I'll be showing you that. However, cheap doesn't always mean bad. And what I mean by that is there are some caveats to getting a really good picture out of this, but you're going to have to take a little bit of effort getting into it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the front and just take a look at the entire outside of it. So down here, Sylvania is what it says. However, you can get one that'll say Magnavox or etc. Sometimes I've seen all the other brands that I've listed before on a set like this, especially if it's a Magnavox Sylvania or per se Symphonic. Down here, this is where your DVD player is, as well as your VHS player, power, as well as your volume, and of course your DVD playback functions. You can select between DVD or TV/VCR, or you can do it by your remote. There's your channel up and down. I have no idea why it's so far away from volume. There's a record button, as well as your play, fast forward, stop, etc. And your one composite with stereo in port, as well as a headphone jack. So that's pretty neat. It's composite stereo. Does not have any other inputs besides that one, aside from, I guess, RF, if you really want to consider that. But this, funny enough, uses both composite and S-video in a unique way. So it uses composite on the VHS as well as on the input. So, for example, I'm running Super Nintendo into it. But the DVD player is actually S-video, and it actually has a surprisingly good picture on it, which is really neat. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the back. Now, as you might have noticed, the back is actually off this thing, and we'll go ahead and get into that here in a little bit too. So down here, this is where your model and everything will be. So that's where it says your model, that's where it says your manufacturing date, right on the bottom. And, of course, on the back here, this is where you'll have your one RCA port for audio out / coaxial, and this is where your antenna port will be. Down here is where your power will come out. And overall, the case design is just a standard plastic-backed case design. Now, looking at the back of this tube, and the reason why I have it off in the first place, is because I have been adjusting this thing for quite some time. So, I figured, you know what, I'll show you the back as well. So, this is your tube right here with the anode cap. Do not touch this, especially if it's live. And on a Funai, I'm not sure if this even has a bleeder resistor. I can't confirm because I've never actually discharged this thing. But if Retrotech comes along and actually grabs one of these sets and decides it's worth his time to use it, I'd be very curious to see if it creates a zap. Over here, this is where your tube is and the model number. And as you can see, there's your parent company, Funai. Down here, these are where your boards are. So this has your VHS with this board, that's your power in. And on this side, has a bridge connector with your flyback transformer, your DVD player, as well as a couple other input boards and everything running up to the neck board. This neck board, by the way, is extremely small. There's no adjustments to it. It's about the size of my hand, about the palm of my hand, I should say. But you have your convergence rings right here to adjust with, as well as your purity rings, your little yoke, and the little stands that it comes with. Now, you may have noticed I also did add convergence strips, and I'll actually show you how the video looks like and why I added these convergence strips, which is really nice. But down here, you have your flyback transformer as well as your adjustments for that. There's nothing really too much else to talk about back here. I'm not going to be doing any further adjustments on this thing, so I'm not going to be showing anything involving adjustments back here. But what I will be showing, of course, are adjustments to this via service remote, which is going to be an interesting topic to talk about. So let's go ahead and get into the remote side of this thing. Alright, so the remote. I'm not even sure if this is the actual remote that this came with, but it works for it. This is a Funai standard remote. It looks just like this. Made in China. And it turns on the TV as it is. It also has some DVD playback functions right around here, as well as, of course, your picture, which can change your settings, your select, which is just your input select. I don't know why it just says select. Record button, channel up, down, everything like that. As well as disk menu, and anything else that you really would need, except for a dang eject button. That's right. If you're wanting to eject the DVD, you cannot do it via remote. You have to go down there and press it. Of course, it's kind of redundant, because if you're going to be swapping out DVDs anyways for this, you would just have to, well, get up out of your chair, walk over, and press the DVD button, and then swap it out. But I still prefer having one on here on the remote, just to make it a little bit more convenient. This is a normal remote, by the way. This is not a service remote, nor can it ever be, and I will show you how a service remote looks like on one of these things. Alright, now these are your service remotes, or at least they can be, I should put it simply. So these remotes here are ones that you'll actually see quite commonly with these Funai-based sets. As you can see, there's the Emerson logo, Insignia logo, and just a generic one. But these are what you'll normally see out of most all Funai TVs whenever you buy them or get them. This is the type of remote you can use, or at least one that you can use with them. So this one in particular here, this used to be for my Emerson EWF 2006, and it was also used for my Durabrand DWT1304, which is pretty convenient because this is a service remote, and it came as a service remote from whenever I first got it, which was really nice. And I'll actually show you back here how it is. So you can see there are two jumper pins, one right here, and it even says on the back of the PCB on how to basically turn it into it. So this got snipped, that got put on, and that essentially converted it to a service remote. Now, the downside is you lose out on the original remote feature, so you can't turn it on, you can't change channels, nothing like that. So ideally, what you want to do is either buy a second remote or wire in a 3-prong switch to here, which can switch back and forth. Now, this remote we're not actually going to be focusing on, because this is not the remote that we use for triple play TVs. They're a little bit different, and that's where these come in. These are actually quite a bit different compared to your standard Funai remotes. And I just kicked the back of the thing, and a screw went flying. So that's nice. Actually, it's pretty good to keep this in handy, because I have all my screws somewhere. But these are your triple play Funai service remotes. They're a bit different. They're a little bit bigger, and the way you can actually identify if they're a triple play remote is by this serial number here, N9278UD. Now, these two are very similar to each other. They do have a couple different buttons, but overall, the actual PCBs and the chips that they use are the exact same. This one I'm not opening up because I already have one that is, and also this one was a really big pain to close. But we'll be actually using this one to show you the service menu on this. But to delve into it, what you need to do for this service remote to even get it to become a service remote is based on the, well, service manual. You need to cut pin 10 of this chip, and actually pin 10, if I flip this around, it would be much easier to identify because pin 1 is the top left. Pin 10 is that bottom left one right there, and then it needs you to bridge pin 10's leg to pin 17. Now, the service manual is a little bit concerning because it says cut pin 10's leg. Don't do that. Instead, what you should do is solder pin 17 with a wire when leaving it soldered in. Don't lift the leg, nothing like that. Then then go to lift pin 10's leg. Don't cut it, lift it, because then that'll give you a lot more leverage on where to solder to. The pad underneath doesn't matter, so if you pull the pad, who gives a crap? It doesn't change it. And then what you're going to want to do is take the wire and solder it to the leg that's lifted up on pin 10. That will convert it to a service remote, and you'll know if it worked because if you press the power button on the service remote, it won't turn the TV on. That's because you actually lose the functionality of it being a normal remote, and thus becomes a service remote. Now, if it doesn't work and you mess up, funny enough, if you mess up pin 10, especially like how I did with this one, even though I got this one to work again, this will still actually end up working like a normal remote. So, at least, I guess, worst case scenario, as long as you didn't mess up stuff like pin 17 by bridging a whole bunch of pins together and stuff like that, you can still use it like a normal remote. But this is the remote to use it with, so it'll show, like, if you look up online, it'll be like asking for the NE220UD, NE209UD remotes and stuff like that. Don't go off that, just go off this. So this is what you can use for your triple plays. I can't confirm if it'll work for those that just use a DVD player or a VHS player on top of the TV, but I can confirm that this definitely works, and both of these versions will work just fine, as long as you have this layout. Now, unfortunately, as you can judge by the size of my finger, and I don't have a very big hand, this is extremely hard to do. I also did not have the proper gauge wire, so this took a really long time to do, as well as a tiny soldering iron. I have a pretty big one. So attempt this with caution, or ask a friend, especially if they're really good at soldering, to help you do this, especially if you want to turn it into a service remote. So, that being said, if you do this, of course, you want to get a second remote so you can actually still turn the TV on and off. And luckily, that's why I still have the regular remote that's sitting right there. But without further ado, let's go ahead, turn back on the TV, and delve into the service options for this thing. And it's going to be a bit of a long one. Alright, so back to this. I now have 240p test suite turned on with the sharpness pattern just for visibility. And the first thing we're going to be doing is taking our service remote, or if you have one, and we're going to be pressing disk menu. Now, when you press disk menu, by the way, before you do that, you want to maybe write down what settings you had for your picture, so your contrast, brightness, color, hue, tint, everything like that. Because the moment you press the disk menu button, it all resets back to 0. So, as you can see, that it got a little brighter because it actually reset my contrast and brightness back to 0. And it was in like -10. But whenever you do that, as you may notice, it popped up a little service menu. So you get the little 4s down there, some more model crap, and whatever. Now, to change the picture, basically adjusting the difference for contrast, brightness, sharpness, tint, and color, you want to press the picture button right here, and that will cycle through the individual ones. So if you do, I believe, let me see if I can hit picture and get it to go somewhere. Okay, so there we go. So if you hit picture and then you hit the number 1, that will get you your brightness. Oh, well, I just hit the wrong thing there. So if you keep hitting 1, it'll cycle through brightness, contrast, color, tint, and a couple other things that I don't really know. That says sharpness right there. If you hit 2, that will cycle through your S-video, brightness, contrast, color, tint, sharpness, etc. So you can actually set 2 different ones for both inputs. Now, why does it say YC? That's because, like I mentioned earlier, the DVD player uses S-video on this thing. Now, you can't get S-video normally out of this thing, and I'm not sure if you can actually modify the set to accept S-video. Pretty sure you can. That's a Funai. But you can change both. And like I said, you go through them individually, pressing 1 and 2. So that's how you do that. Also, if you want to leave it, typically speaking, what I do is I just hit the power button on the service remote, and that'll actually exit the service mode. So once you do that, let me go ahead and actually switch back to the aux input. Then you just press this menu again, and you're back on your way. Now, every single number here, for the most part, will do different things. For example, I'll show you the number 7. That will change between red, white, or red, blue, green, and white. Number 8 shows you your H position. Number 9 shows you your V position, as well as your vertical size. And so on and so forth. There are a couple other options that you can scroll through on here too. If you hit the volume up and down, it will actually change different volume options, or different options like DVD bright, contrast, sharpness, etc. here, as well as a test for DVD. It's a little weird, not gonna lie. I never really used that one. But it's there for if you wanted to use it. So there are quite a handful of options, and the service manual I am using to reference all this from is from a Sylvania 6720 FDF is what I believe it is. That's basically a 27-inch version, not of exactly this, but very similar. It's got the same boards inside, has the same service menu. So for the most part, pretty same. This particular TV, by the way, there is another model of it that I referenced, or I saw that was a Magnavox branded one. It is very similar in design, but it is a year older and does not have an ATSC tuner. So you can also reference that for a service manual for this thing, because unfortunately the service manual is paywalled on this thing, which is why I can't really do too much else in terms of adjustments for this aside from the service menu. You might notice, if I get in pretty close, horizontal size is not perfectly overscanned like vertical size is. That's because, as you might have seen, there is no horizontal size adjustment on this, and only the 27-inch versions actually had them. There is a little potentiometer on the back of the board that is unpopulated on this model, but on the 27 inches and higher, if I remember correctly, they are. So that is kind of what you would do with your service stuff. Now, like I said, if you don't have a triple play, chances are you'll be using that other service remote over there. But it's kind of a toss-up. You're going to really have to look at the service menu just to be sure, or the service manual just to be sure. But without further ado, let's go ahead and stop talking about service stuff. Let's go ahead and pay attention more to the picture of this thing, since I have 240p test suite up. Alright, so as you can see, I have the grid pattern here, and just looking at the grid pattern, surprisingly enough, for composite video, this is actually quite sharp for what you can get out of a cheap little Funai, such as this Sylvania. Surprisingly, it does have a little bit of defined scan lines. The geometry is okay. Like I said, I really wish I could expand horizontal size, but I can't. Unfortunately, there is a linearity issue, and that's actually something that's pretty common on these flat sets, I've noticed. They have a really cheap horizontal circuit, or horizontal linearity circuit, and it causes this to happen. So it's just something that I kind of deal with. I don't really know how to fix it without having to tinker with the back of the board, and even then I don't know where to look for that, nor do I know where to look to increase horizontal size as of right now. But convergence is also alright. It's not the absolute best, but it's definitely a lot better than what it used to be, because this set, unfortunately, was bowing a little bit, so it had a little droop on the bottom and a little droop on the top. And when I lifted the yoke up, it misconverged the corners quite a bit. However, it did fix the bowing problem. So what I did was I took the convergence strips that you saw on the back earlier, and I aligned it as best as I could to get a surprisingly decent image. So let's go ahead and put that image to use. I'll go ahead and fire up a game, and I'll get pretty close so you can see these scan lines on it. Alright, so I got Pocky and Rocky fired up now. As you can see just from that still image, it actually looks pretty good. And in fact, I'll go ahead and turn off the lights to get a better image. So, like I said, this is only running 240p right now through my Super Nintendo. And it is surprisingly good for what it can do. Composite only, has a surprisingly good comb filter. Yeah, it does have a bit of dot crawl, but most composite does. So overall, the image is actually quite good. So for a really, really cheaply made set that was mass-produced, this is something you could actually consider, especially if there's nothing else around. I mean, most people, whenever they look at a set, they're like, you know, you want the best. Well, a lot of people want Sony Trantrons and stuff like that, but if you're really looking for something that'll actually do you surprisingly well, especially if you want to take the time to adjust it and make it look better, this is actually pretty good for that. So I do actually recommend these sets, especially for them being cheap, and they're pretty fun too. So like, if you don't like the set anymore, I mean, who gives a crap if you throw them away? There's a million more of them, or give them to your best friend. Who knows? Or give them to your worst enemy and have it explode on their face. Don't do that. But like I said, really, really good for what it can do. I don't really expect much of this set because, like I said, it's extremely cheap. But for what it can do, pretty good. Also, I did watch some DVDs on this thing, and actually, for S-Video, it's really dang clean. So if you want to modify this or get into it, you probably could tap into the Luma and Chroma signals of the DVD player, and, well, you'll have yourself a really nice S-Video image. So that's pretty awesome, but without further ado, that's pretty much all I got for this video. So we'll go ahead and go back out to take a look one last time at the TV. Alright guys, so that's pretty much all I have left of talking about this Sylvania CT202SL8. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do have this set, by the way, and you know that you can hook up a digital signal to it, for example, like a cable TV or whatnot from like Dish, and actually get it to display an image, I'd be really curious to see if you can do that. But overall, that's pretty much all I got. You know, don't count out Funai, or don't count out Sylvania in this case, for CRT TVs. I always like to take and just play around with and see how good a CRT can do, just because brands don't always mean everything. I don't always like Sony's, for example, and sometimes these things are actually surprisingly better than what you think they might be. So, that being said, thank you guys so much for watching again, and I will see you in the next one.